So this is an amateur work written by, well, someone in the family. Was it me? Maybe. Actually, I contributed to it. All right. Storytime with Stone. Reflection by Anonymous. It was a beautiful spring morning as Sylvie drove in the slow-moving rush hour traffic on a regular route to work. She was only half listening to the Today programme and glanced across the empty passenger seat at the hurrying mass of humanity that appeared in surges every time she passed the London Underground station. Braking gently, the car came to a halt as the traffic lights turned red, and Sylvie knew from experience that it'd be a long wait while bulldozers, lorries and cars manoeuvred onto the site of extensive roadworks being undertaken in the centre of town. She pulled on the handbrake but let the engine purr softly as she watched the activity around her. Crowd thinned out for a moment and she gazed idly into an empty department store window. And then she was startled to see a wraith-like figure of a man reflected in the glass. She jolted upright in her chair and sort of stretched forward to try and see the figure more clearly. She was shocked to see the man pointing directly at her and beckoning with his finger. That moment, the car radio fucking switched itself from radio 4 to the haunting sounds of the Supreme singing Reflections. Through the mirror of my mind, time after time, I see reflections of you and me. Reflections of the way life used to be. Sylvie gasped and spoke out loud in a strangled voice. Peter Simpson. It was then the figure began to fade from the outside edges to the centre and eventually disappeared. Well, Sylvie was rigid with shock and became aware of someone banging on the fucking car window and yelling at her while all around her drivers beat their fucking horns and lowered their windows and shouted at her to move as the lights turned to green to back to red and were fucking green yet again. Anyway, she pulled away and drove off at quite some speed, and within a few minutes she'd gone from a state of relaxation and idle daydreaming to one of shock, recognising that figure, person, reflected in the window. And then to being stressed by the honking of cars and the fucking shouting of impatient fucking drivers all around her. Anyway, as she arrived at the office, she tried to push the events of the morning in the back of her mind and decided to analyse what had happened later. She began to tackle the emails that would shape the rest of her day, and well, by mid-morning she waited her turn at the coffee machine, and her colleague Paula, who was usually the source of office gossip and amusing tales of her love life, looked at Sylvie and commented how pale she was, if she was okay. Anyway, she just declared she was fine and said she had to dash. Without her coffee, mate. Her mind was in some turmoil, though. Thinking back to that reflection of Peter's face in the window and the way the radio had changed channel of its own. Paula's remarks sent her thoughts right back to what had happened on her way to work, and she decided to take the afternoon off and called her friend Jenny to ask if they could meet for a drink that evening. And once settled in a cosy corner of their favourite pub, the Headless Woman, Sylvie described the events of the morning. When she'd finished, Jenny whistled softly and said, Peter fucking Simpson is a fucking freak. I'm amazed you went out with him for so long. What is it, 6 months ago you ended it? As I remember, you just stopped answering his calls and emails with no explanation, right? Isn't that what they call ghosting? Looks as if Peter is doing some ghosting of his own, said Jenny. Well, Sylvie was not amused by this remark. I don't believe in ghosts, and I was rather cruel and totally withdrawing from the relationship without further explanation, but, well, that's the way we do things today, isn't it? I think this is Peter's revenge. It's just some weird cyber stalking or something. Perhaps I should just report it to the police. She reminded Jenny of how Peter filled his house with electronic gadgets and remote controls for switching this fucking thing on and that fucking thing off. And when he was in the office or on the move, sensors fucking everywhere, triggering cameras and sending images to his phone in real time and holograms and all that fucking technology shit. Sylvie remembered Peter telling her about a marketing contract that involved some smart billboards where the camera was set up to project and display particular images when it saw certain things. I mean, maybe a camera could have been in position and registered the image of a bicycle or a car, perhaps. On reflection, Sylvie realised that with this kind of technology, a camera could be set up easy. That's it, she explained, and that's how he did it. He set something up. He's fucking with me. Anyway, Jenny, he was a proverbial whiz-kid and could easily have rigged up hidden cameras. Anyway, it would have been child's play for him. Make that car radio, change to play that song. He was a genius at it. Sylvie did not want to involve the police and decided to just try and ignore it all. Intimidating as it was, just put it behind her. A spiritualist friend told her that a certain sound could be the cause of all sorts of paranormal sightings. She asked Sylvie if it was possible the song Reflections could have come on the radio before she saw this figure. Sylvie was sure this was not the case. The question did leave a tiny seed of doubt. However, another incident confirmed her suspicion that Peter, in a cruel act of revenge, was using every electronic means at his fucking disposal to frighten her fucking shitless. A few days later, after that original incident, Sylvie arrived home at the usual time on the dot, 6 o'clock. She let herself into the house and placed her umbrella in the hall stand and took off her coat and glanced in the hall mirror, jumping horrified to see the same fucking image of Peter again reflected there, just staring and pointing a finger at her. Anyway, she freaked out again and grabbed her coat and her keys and legged it out the fucking door and arranged to meet Jenny and the headless woman again. Well, telling Jenny what she'd seen in the mirror at home calmed Sylvie's nerves a bit, and it seemed Jenny now believed Peter probably was responsible for the electronic harassment. They were discussing the what, where and how of making a police report when, coincidentally, a woman called Sonia, who had been part of the same social circle when Sylvie and Peter were together, walked into the bar. Go on, asked Jenny, ask if she'd seen Peter recently. Casually, Sylvie went up to Sonia and, after pleasantries were exchanged, asked, how is Peter these days? Sonia looked at her a little oddly and said, haven't you heard? Peter died about a month after you stopped returning his calls. Life can only be understood backward, but it must be lived forward.